the I will speak very slowly as he prepares. Hello! We have one more presentation for you of 2021. Flip brought his fan club tonight.
You need fans in Miami.
What?
You need fans in Miami.
All right, here we go. So I get to introduce our final presenter, the wonderful Awesome Aguilera. He's a Jujutsu blue belt under the Vale brothers. Since moving to Colorado Springs and becoming a nerd boss, he has also expanded the philosophy and techniques that he is learning under the Valenti Brothers system, which is directly connected to Grandmaster Gracie. He is a wonderful human, very inspiring, and I was just so blessed to have him here. Please welcome Flip.
What's up, nerds? It's nice to be back in the 305. It's a good, I believe it's like 19 degrees in Colorado right now. And I would not be dressed like this if I was outside. So it's amazing to be here, and it's also great to see Laura again. I always love seeing your face. All right, so let's see. I think if I go right, there we go. So, my name literally is Flip Awesome Aguilera. Awesome is my middle name. You can ask me about that after. But today we're going to talk about the history of Jiu-Jitsu and why the UFC even exists at all. All right, so what does Jiu-Jitsu even mean? And if you notice, I spell it J-U-J-U-T-S-U. Does anybody know why I spell it that way? Anybody? All right, well, the reason that I spell it that way is because it's a Japanese word. And in Japan, if you translated it to English, that's how it would be spelled. But as we're going to get through this story today, you'll see that it's also known as Jiu-Jitsu because that's the way the Brazilians hear it. And there's also Jiu-Jitsu, which is kind of how it was spelled in the early 20th century. So, what does Ju mean? So J-U. J-U means gentle, soft, supple, pliable, yielding, flexible. What it does not mean is strength, power, force, all the things you might think you need in a fight, right? And what does Jitsu mean? Jitsu means the art and technique of a concept or idea. So Jiu-Jitsu, as the Japanese people would say, it means the gentle art. And how many of us like a little gentle touch from time to time? There's so much aggressiveness out there, we need a little gentleness. All right. So the samurai were the ones who standardized Jiu-Jitsu, and it was a standardized hand-to-hand unarmed combat systematized by the Japanese samurai. Now the samurai were part of the very upper class of the feudal period in Japan, and if anybody knows about the feudal period, whoever had the most land, that's who won, right? They had the most power. And back then, the feudal lords used to actually give money to the samurai schools, or what are called ryus, so that the samurai could teach the next generation of people that they would need to kick ass so that they could go and conquer more land. Now, during the feudal period, Japan was closed, so there were no ideas coming in or out of Japan. And that lasted from 1163 to 1603. Now, in 1603, the Edo period begins. In the Edo period, something happens with Jiu-Jitsu and it goes underground. And the reason it went underground are for two reasons. There were two narratives that really took hold. First one was, we want nothing to do with the old times. So the culture of Japan was like, we're over where we've been. And the reason that they even opened up is because a military ship by, I think it was Captain Matthew Perry, not the one from Friends, but the actual person, landed on the shore of Japan without their permission and showed up with a big battleship. And Japan, who had been closed, was still fighting with swords and knives, and all of a sudden this big battleship with big guns shows up, and they're like, oh my god, we thought we were the best at everything, and obviously we realized we are not. So they began to open, and during the Edo period, things open. Jiu-Jitsu goes underground because the people think two things. Number one, we want nothing to do with the old times. Number two, if you engage in things that have to do with the old times, you are a low-class person. And coming from a caste system where class is very important, being low class was not so fun. So what ended up happening is it goes underground and it becomes more of like a barroom brawl. Like it just goes underground in that way. Now, in 1868, during the Meiji period, Jujutsu resurfaces. Now, before I go on to why it resurfaces or the characters that made it resurface, I want to talk about Jujutsu as an art of self-defense. Because later on in the talk, we're going to talk about there's self-defense and there's competition. Both of these things are super amazing things. But when you do something for competition, you always have to narrow your focus to a set of rules and guidelines. Where in the street, the only rule is that there is no rule, right? In the street, they can kick you in the back of the head. There's no referee there to stop them from doing that. So, in the self-defense realm, which is the one I really want to focus on, you have three things that they focus on. First one is striking, which is atami waza, so that's punching, kicking, any of that. Nage waza is like clinching in the standing position and throwing. And katame waza is when you're on the ground, and specifically ne waza is like really, really, really on the ground. So those are the three types of things that we really focus on the self-defense aspect of Jiu-Jitsu. So now let's take a step back, and we're going to talk about Jigoro Kano. So this guy, if there was a mountain like they have in South Dakota with presidents on them, and it was a Jiu-Jitsu mountain, this guy would definitely be on it. And he had sayings like maximum efficiency, minimum effort, right? So again, not power, not strength, flow. And he was born in 1860, died in 1938. He was an educator, he was a super nerd, and he's very important in the world of martial arts, but he's very important, period, because he did so many things for the world that people don't even know about it. When you get to know him, you're like, oh my God, that guy did that? He planted the seeds for that? And yeah, he was a political scientist, taught economics at the highest level in Japan. He was a really smart guy. But when he was a kid, he was bullied. And remember that the narrative that they were telling back then is that martial arts is something that's done by low-class people. But because he was part of the educated class, because his father was also an educator, he decided, you know what, I'm going to learn these things, because as a full-grown adult, he was 5'2", 90 pounds. And you can go to the YouTube, type in Jigoro Kano, and you can see black and white videos of him throwing people obviously bigger than him, because it doesn't take much to be bigger than somebody who's 5'2" and 90 pounds. But he really systematized being a small person and being able to use leverage to throw them all over the place. So he really refined that system. You're gonna get on this, Joe? You're gonna be on this? Because you're about 5'2", 90 pounds, right? So something else Jigoro Kano did is he rebranded Jiu-Jitsu to Judo, right? So Jitsu is the art, the gentle art, where Do, now that Japan was open, was getting a lot more influences from China, and they were getting ideas from books like the Tao Te Ching. And when you translate Tao into Japanese, it's Do, and if you translate those things into English, it's the way or the path. So now, he rebrands Jiu-Jitsu into Judo, and he also adds a big philosophical component back on top of it that was lost during that Edo and Meiji time in Japan. So he adds the philosophical component, and because of that philosophical component, there are a few things that go a little bit against him, and we're gonna get into that. So, in 1882, he opens up what is called the Kodokan Judo Academy. If you go to Tokyo today, the Kodokan still exists. When he opened it in 1882, he opened it in a room in a Buddhist temple, and if you go there today, it is a 10-story building that is basically, okay, so for our Israelis here, right? If you're Christian or Jewish, going to Israel is very, it's very big. If you're Islam or Muslim, going to Mecca is big. If you're into martial arts, going to the Kodokan is like, because a lot of martial arts ended up coming out of that place. Now in 1886, the Kodokan wins what is the Tokyo Police Exhibition. So the Tokyo Police, they put out an exhibition, invite all the schools in Tokyo for the opportunity that whoever won that competition, they would get the contract to teach the Tokyo Police Department that martial art. So the Kodokan wins this, and once that happens, Judo begins to explode and people all around the world want to begin to know about it. Jigoro Kano was also the first person to accept women to train, right? So he thought about equality way back then. And although this didn't happen during actually it did happen during his lifetime, but I just learned from my wife the other day that she was watching a Jujutsu video that there was a group of suffragettes, and they were called the bodyguard, because when the suffragettes began their movement, they were, for lack of a better term, they were beat down a lot. And there was a protest in London where 2 suffragettes ended up being killed by the police for the protest that they were having. So there was this one lady who decided, you know what, I'm going to learn this, and she taught it to 30 other women, and every time a suffragette was doing a talk, they would stand behind her and around her as the bodyguard, and these badass chicks knew some massive jujitsu, so it was, And during the end of his life, he was also the first Asian member of the International Olympic Committee, so he started planting the seeds of getting judo into the Olympics. Now again, I'm going to make that distinction. When something becomes a sport or a competition, there's rules and guidelines. As opposed to when things happen in the street, there are no rules and guidelines. Jiu-Jitsu in the United States. So, one of the first people to do Jiu-Jitsu in the United States was Teddy Roosevelt. Because after he heard that Kodokan had won that competition in Tokyo, he called Jigoro Kano, got a hold of him and said, could you please send some of your instructors, because I would like to learn this more about what you guys are doing. And when he did that, what he did is he invited all the best athletes, all the best wrestlers, boxers in the United States, and he actually had an exhibition in the White House. And you can actually go to the Teddy Roosevelt Museum, which I think is in North Dakota, and see his handwritten letters to his son with things that, like this quote that say, the art of Jiu-Jitsu is worth more in every way than all of our athletics combined. Because what he saw were these small little Japanese people taking on the biggest wrestlers and boxers that America had to offer. And again, throwing them all over the place, choking them out, making them tap out. And he was like, well, obviously I need to learn this. So he actually hired the emissaries that were sent to be his personal teachers, and they taught him for a good 4 or 5 years. So there's a rough and tumble Teddy Roosevelt. So now we have Mitsuyo Maeda, and this is something that I say a lot, and this is for life. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? We're always trying to do things in a hurry, but if we do things slow and we learn how to do them more efficiently, they just become faster over time. And that's a much better approach to life than just go, 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 go. So Mitsuyo Maeda was born in 1878 to 1941. He was a student of the Kodokan, and he helped to expand Kodokan Judo, or also called Kano Jiu-Jitsu, to US, Cuba, Mexico, Central America, and finally, of course, Brazil. So in 1915, he finally makes it to the shores of Brazil, where he ended up staying the rest of his life after that. And there he meets a gentleman called Gastão Gracie. And Gastão Gracie was a partner in a circus that was going on during that time, because circuses were big things because there was no television. So he joins the circus and does what are called Vale Tudo matches. Do we have any Brazilians in here? Wow, that's crazy. We need some more Brazilian nerds, so if you know any of them, tell them to come over here. So he would do what are called Vale Tudo matches, and Vale Tudo means everything goes. There's no rules. It's like fighting in the street. And in the circus, he ended up doing extremely well, and he ended up getting a reputation for doing really well in these matches. And he would actually offer people, he's like, I will pay you if you can even do anything to me at all. And it's like, if you could throw me, I will give you 250, whatever it is that they gave in Brazil. If you can knock me down, I'll give you this much. If you can beat me, I will give you this much. And I'll let you know that he didn't really have to give out any money ever. So he does this in the circus, and because of this, and Jigoro Kano's whole philosophical way of looking at judo, he has a difference of opinion with Jigoro Kano. And Jigoro Kano did not believe that people should fight for money. He thought that was morally wrong. But Jigoro Kano also had a lot of money and could afford to have that ideal. where Mitsuyo Maeda did not have that much money. It was like, that's nice that you want that, but I still need to put food on my table, and I'm really good at this, and people pay me for this. He actually ended up teaching the Brazilian military jiu-jitsu as well. So let's go back to Gustavo Gracie. He meets him, and after a few years of doing the circus, he finally opens an academy, and in that academy, he begins teaching the Gracie brothers. The first or oldest of the Gracie brothers is Carlos Gracie, who lived from 1902 to 1994. And he was a student of Mitsuyo Maeda. He was the eldest of the Gracie brothers. And eventually he ended up opening Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in Rio de Janeiro. Now, he was not so good at fighting. He maybe had 2 or 3 fights. He said he had a lot more, but he was a really eccentric guy. He was a hothead when he was young, but when he was old, he kind of ended up being one of those people who just wanted to be left alone and not bothered by anybody. And even though he was that way, he was still a very influential person in what we call today Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But now, next, is his brother. And his brother, who lived 1913 to 2009, are what people consider the godfather of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And he was actually the family fighter. But what makes that so funny is that when he was a kid, his family didn't allow him to do Jiu-Jitsu because they thought that he was too small and frail. Because the first time that he trained Jiu-Jitsu, he passed out, and the doctors were like, well, you've got vertigo, and people who have vertigo shouldn't be doing this thing where you're throwing people around and you're ending up going up and down on the floor. But with all that, he ended up being the person who really shifted what people consider Jiu-Jitsu today. And what he did is that he refined what's called the guard position, which means you were on your back with somebody on top of you and they're in between your legs, right? Missionary. Yes, that's another word. That's a synonym for it, right? So he refined being on the ground, because most people think that when you're on the ground and somebody's on top of you, you're losing a fight. And he proved to people that not only can I be on the ground, but I can break your arm from here, I can choke you out from here. All I need to do is be patient and wait for you to be impatient. And he really refined that, which is why today the sport of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu happens on the ground. But he was also a natural teacher. And one day, as the story goes, Carlos was running late from a business meeting, and the student that he was supposed to be teaching was at the school, and Elio was there already. And Elio was like, hey, let's get some practice in until my brother gets here, and then you guys can do your lesson. And as it has been said, once Carlos got to the school, the student turns to Carlos and tells him, why don't you have him teach? This guy is just an amazing teacher. He's patient, he's chill, and he's really, really, really good, even though none of us know because we don't give him a chance. So after that, he started taking more control of teaching. And eventually, as he got older and stopped fighting, his children picked up the baton and started doing just as well as he did. But at some point, we get to the part where him and his son have the idea that they should create the UFC, or what is called the Ultimate Fighting Championship, right? Bam. So why was the UFC created? The UFC was inspired by something called the Gracie Challenge. So Gracie, all of them, all the brothers used to tell people, look, everybody says they have the best system, but let's not talk about it. Come to the dojo and let's see what happens. And what ended up happening through this Gracie Challenge is that they started to build a reputation because they kept winning. And they kept people that were 10 times bigger than them. It didn't matter, faster, slower, whatever. They just kept winning and winning and winning. And actually, Elio challenged Joe Louis, who was the heavyweight champion of the time, to a match. But the Boxing Federation at that time did not allow it because they knew that Joe Louis would lose. And now look, 100 years later, what's more popular, UFC or boxing? Right? UFC. There you go. So, UFC was created or inspired by the Gracie Challenge, and it happened in my now home state on November 12th, 1993 in Denver, Colorado was the first UFC. And it had the Vale Tudo rules, which means no time, no weight class, multiple fights in a single day until you had one winner. So it was a bracket. And you had to fight winner against winner until there was one winner left. So here were the first UFC fighters. So up here we have Gerard Godot, who's a Sabat guy, which is like a French kickboxing style. And again, the whole thing was created to answer the question. Once we stop talking about who's the best, who's the best? So Gerard Godot versus Taylor Tully, who was a sumo wrestler. And this one ended after a few minutes after Gerard Godot kicked the sumo wrestler in the face, and you can literally see his face breaking and the tooth flying out of his mouth. The second fight was Kevin Rosier, who was a kickboxer, against Zane Frazier, who was a Kempo, and that was actually a really good fight. And the guy on top, Kevin Rosier, ended up winning. And if you ask me, this guy, I know you can't see him that well, but if you go and look for a picture of him, he looks like Nelson from The Simpsons, the bully. He has very much that look. Yeah, that guy. And even though he was a kickboxer, he didn't do a lot of kickboxing. He was more like a barroom brawler. He was just coming forward and swinging, and hopefully you could stop him. So he ends up winning as well. Hoist Gracie, Jiu-Jitsu versus Art Jimison in boxing. That lasted a good 30 seconds before Hoist Gracie had him on the ground and choked him out. And Ken Shamrock, who's a shoot fighter, against Patrick Smith, who did Taekwondo. Ken Shamrock ended up winning that one with a footlock that almost tore his foot off. So that was the quarterfinal. In the semifinal, you had Gerard Godot against Kevin Rosier, the kickboxer. And this one ended because Gerard Godot ended up stepping on Kevin Rosier so many times that his ribs were just collapsing. Yeah, that's when UFC was good, huh? And then in the other semifinal was Hoist Gracie against Ken Shamrock. And Hoist ended up rear naked choking him, but the referee didn't see it. And he let go, and then it just ended up, there was a discussion. It was a very heavy discussion. But then Ken Shamrock said, yes, I tapped, and it ended up all fair there. Which sets up our final, which was Hoist Gracie against Gerard Godot. And this ended after a few minutes with, again, Hoist Gracie throwing Gerard Godot to the ground and rear naked choking him. And this time he didn't let go until the referee literally pried him off of him. And a backstory that most people don't know, because most people thought he didn't let go because he didn't, against Ken Shamrock, the referee didn't stop even though he tapped. But another reason that he didn't let go is that Gerard Godot was biting him, and he was like, if you're gonna bite me, I'm gonna make sure that I squeeze this so hard that you can't even bite anymore. So that's another reason why he didn't let go. So, UFC #1 champion is Hoist Gracie, which now, in the world, introduces people to what people think now of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And people are like, well, is this really the best system? Well, in UFC #2, Hoist Gracie comes back and defends his title. In UFC #3, he does not defend the title, but he did not lose. What ended up happening is he made it to the final, he was injured, and he took himself out, so then they put an alternate in, and that's the guy who ended up winning, Harold Howard from karate. But then he comes back for UFC #4 and wins again, and at this point, the empirical evidence is in. The system that you want, if you want to protect yourself in an all-out brawl with no rules, is Jiu-Jitsu. Now, UFC #5 comes around, and it's Hoist Gracie and Ken Shamrock again, and this time it ends up in a draw because for the first time, somebody was able to neutralize what Jiu-Jitsu was at all. And what he ended up doing is they ended up going to the floor, he laid on top of him and just didn't move for about 25 minutes. And since he didn't move, Hoist had nothing to grab, and after about 30 minutes, the crowd was really upset, and then they were like, we're gonna give you guys 5 more minutes, so that's when they decided to add time to the UFC, because nothing was happening. But after those 5 minutes, Ken Shamrock still didn't move. They ended up calling the fight, and that was the first draw of UFC. So, once it came down to the action, there was a system that rose to the top over and over again, and that system was Jiu-Jitsu, specifically for self-defense. And in the school that I go to, there's this quote that we like to say all the time, and if it resonates with you, do something about it. So here's the quote. Self-defense is not just a set of techniques, it's a state of mind, and it begins with the belief that you are worth defending. So Thank you very much. I'm Flip Awesome Aguilera. And that was the history of Jiu-Jitsu and why it exists. Any questions out there? We have one question. Sylvester Stallone, where did he go wrong? I don't think he went wrong anywhere. He's a pretty successful guy. And what? Well, the thing is that I am not one to put any martial art down. I think all martial arts are amazing. But Aikido is, you know, full of a lot of joint locks, which are great, which we use in Jiu-Jitsu as well. But if you can't get that lock, what are you going to do after that? If you don't have anything else, what are you going to follow that up with? Yes. What was that? How did I get into Jiu-Jitsu? So, for a decade, literally a whole decade, I passed by 163rd where this school is, and I thought to myself, because I'm a holistic health coach, personal trainer, I'm into movement and all that fun stuff, and I had never tried it. And I literally drove by for a decade this school thinking, I should try that one day. I should try that one day. I should try that one day. Finally, in October 2019, I said, how about I stop saying I should try that one day and actually walk in? And the second I walked in, I knew that I had made a mistake and I should have walked in 10 years earlier. So that's how I got into Jiu-Jitsu. Are we good? All right, thank you guys very much. You guys are the best. We love you, Miami. And to all our nerds in Colorado Springs, we are streaming this to our Colorado Springs nerds. All the people in Miami, say hello.
All right. That was our last talk of 2021. If you were inspired tonight and you would like to give a presentation, we already got one person interested. Email miami@nerdnite.com and we will work with you on getting you into the 2022 lineup. Our next event is January 13th. We're here the second Thursday of every month. DJ Happens! Woo! Go Cavs!
Hello, nerds! Happy Nerd Night! Another successful year. It is so nice to be back. So, every Thursday, whether Nerd Night's happening or not, we do a little party called Double Stubble, where we have some drag shows, we play some good tunes, and we have a general gay old time. Everybody is welcome. There is no cover, so everybody please feel free to hang out. We are going to have shows. I'm guessing based on how much time we're gonna need to like flip over everything. At like 9:30, 10:30, and 11:30, we got 3 fabulous performers lined up. So that's what's gonna happen. We got Mystic Bill on the decks. He's getting the music started, and I'm gonna hand it back over. If you happen to be in a folding chair, you can be especially helpful.